You're listening to ITDRC's Women in Tech series, where we talk industry pioneers, advice for getting to the next level, and the women out there doing it all. I'm your host, Hannah Ridings, and this episode we'll be talking to Heather Williams. Heather has been in the business for 3 decades, currently working with Tarana Wireless. She joined the org in 2017 after deploying with ITDRC to Hurricane Harvey. If you've ever been the only woman in the room, Heather knows exactly what that's like. So join our conversation about confidence and stay connected. You're listening to Women in Tech.
So this is sort of exciting to get to talk to you guys about this. I have to tell you that when Hannah asked me to speak, we didn't have a topic in mind, and she sent me a list of topics, and they were all terrible. I mean, like for me, it was things like how to ask for a raise and get it. I'm like, well, I suck at that. I have never done well at that. I would be a terrible person. And so we went down, and at the very end, it was, something about unapologetic confidence. And I was like, well, I never apologize for anything. So I guess we'll just figure out how to do that. So her subtitle for it was how to get out of your own way. And I decided that I was kicking around with ideas and how to build a slide deck around this. And so I came up with the accidental courage. And then I was trying to come up with other ideas for how to title this. And really, I'm a big Lord of the Rings fan and Hobbit fan. I was thinking there and back again, because I feel like I've been doing this for so long. I've sort of circled back around on the other side of the posse. And honest to God, I have no idea how I got here. I mean, it's the story of preparation meeting good fortune or something like that. I call my entire career just a series of sheer dumb luck, and I'm going to share some of that with you too. But also, I do know a little bit about how I got here, and this is some of it. So I got we'll talk in a little bit about how it is. I got the InfoSec bug, but I went out and got a certified ethical hacking. But the CWNE is outside of the Wi-Fi community, not a lot of people are familiar with it, but this is a numbered certification. And I think now we're up to maybe getting close to the 400 mark. I know we're over the 300 mark. But when I first became qualified to apply for this certification, so you have to have a number of base certifications and then some advanced certifications. You have to have so many years in the field. And then you have to have publications and have done some things giving back to the community. And then you also have to have 3 write-ups, 3 projects that you've done that exemplify why you are a certified wireless expert, or why you feel like you're qualified for that. The first year that I was eligible to get put my application in was 2015, and I speak at different conferences, usually in non-COVID years, a couple of times a year at least. And it got to the point where it was a little embarrassing, because everywhere I'd go, everybody would have, their name and their title, their CWNE number. And I just took to adding to my subtitle as still not a CWNE. It's complicated. And the reason is because every time I had to write those 3 projects up, and I was a technical writer. I mean, writing is not a problem for me, but I would freeze, because I would picture in my head the people that I knew that were on the board that were going to be reading those projects. And every project that I decided to describe just wasn't good enough. It was, I hadn't done enough. It was stupid. I could just see them reading over my shoulder. It's sort of like having Gordon Ramsay screaming at you while you're trying to make scrambled eggs, only I was trying to get a certification. I literally had to go back and retest on 3 of the certifications because I aged out before I got up the nerve. And I think that they listed me as the person that the application that they got, they still couldn't believe that I still wasn't a CWNE, which I guess is nicer than, your obit coming out and people reading it and going, oh, I can't believe she was still alive. I thought she died like decades ago. So that was a little bit nicer. But then almost right away, I got appointed to be on the CWNP Board of Advisors. So believe it or not, had I applied to be a CWNE the first year that I was eligible, I would have been somewhere in the 150 range, and I would have been woman number 5. When I applied 3 years later, I was CWNE number 264, and I was woman number 6. So
that's incredible. What year was that? Do you remember?
2018.
That is insane.
Yeah. So this is just my way of saying, you know, I'm standing up here, or I'm sitting up here telling you about how to have the courage of your convictions. And I am a hypocrite because I've been there and I have done this over and over again. So it's something that we do. And how do we get out of our own way is just we keep doing it. So again, I know that somebody's already talked to you about imposter syndrome. More women than men have this as a problem. I'm going to tell you, I've met very few people functioning at the level in tech that I do that do not have imposter syndrome. In fact, the statistics show that the more educated, the higher up in terms of expertise, the more knowledgeable you are in your field, the greater the chance is that you're actually going to either have or develop imposter syndrome, which leads to this inevitable, disgusting round robin of things, because now you're looking at yourself and you have imposter syndrome about your imposter syndrome. Like, oh no, I'm not really good enough to qualify to have imposter syndrome over my level of expertise. And I will tell you that I stalk a number of people in Twitter. There's both the Wi-Fi and the InfoSec communities are very active on Twitter. And so I have people that I follow on both sides. And one of the most revered, followed, just listened to when this account talks, and if you're not really big in InfoSec, you may not know it, but it's Swift on Security. And the little avatars, either an ear of corn or maybe, you know, a Taylor Swift picture. But the Swift on Security account is run by someone who is phenomenally knowledgeable. And literally, when the WannaCry wiperware attack came out, there were all kinds of CISOs and directors of IT that were tweeting, I just got called on the carpet to ask how it is that we're going to address this WannaCry thing before it hits us. And I got to tell my CISO or my CEO, we don't have that problem because Swift on Security told me 3 months ago this was coming, and I listened to that account. And so that account regularly posts about their imposter syndrome. So it's just a reality, and it's something that we have to learn to deal with and talk more openly about. So let's just talk about, I had a couple of stories that I wanted to tell you about. And when I started at Ruckus, which was in 2010, I was hired as the global trainer. I very quickly became the training department as some of the other people just left. There were only 2 other people, including the VP. So I was the Ruckus's global trainer. I spent more time outside the US than I did inside the US, and we can talk about that another time. But I will say too much of a good thing is still too much. And so I had the opportunity to pivot in my career. And I was the first female SE for Ruckus, hired me to be the second female SE in Ruckus as she went on to become the director of the SEs. And I took over the national accounts and the distributors and CDW and anybody who had a nationwide footprint, which meant that I was guaranteed to stay in the US. I still didn't get to be at home. But the reason I'm telling you about this is because she offered me the position, and I fell out of my chair, literally fell out of my chair laughing that she'd offered me the position. I told her that I didn't know anything about being an SE. It was a terrible idea. I'd be the worst SE ever. Luckily, she knew better than I did. She informed me that I just didn't know what an SE does, and it turns out that I did just fine. But later that year, the marketing, I'd been doing this for about half a year. The technical marketing team that had committed Ruckus to being the Wi-Fi provider for Interop. For those of you, you probably remember the Interop it was sort of a big deal. This happened to be 2015. It was towards the end of its heyday, but they still ran a network where we brought all of everybody's biggest, newest gadgets, put them together, and had to make the network work. And we provided the backbone and all of the connectivity for the Interop event. we were committed to being the Wi-Fi provider for it for the second year in a row. And I got tagged to do that. I was convinced it was because every other SE was needed in order to be able to make their sales guys quotas. And so I was the expendable SE. So once again, it was, we need an SE to go do something. Oh, we can't afford to send a real SE, send Heather. So once again, it's you're telling yourself the story and making an excuse. It turns out, no, it's just that the guy who had committed to doing it was too lazy and didn't want to go. And so, and this is one of those things where it turns out, you know, it's a series of sheer dumb luck moments, because I went to Interop. For those of you who are familiar with Vegas, it's in the Mandalay Bay. And this will explain to you, this picture right here will explain to you why he was too lazy to do it. Because it's from my hotel room to get up, my commute to get to the NOC where we set up the network, it was a half a mile walk. And then I still had about a 500,000 square feet of area to cover in Wi-Fi. So all of these access points had to be deployed. So the rule when you go to the Mandalay Bay Convention Center to deploy the Wi-Fi is you carry 2 pairs of shoes because you're going to need to change them out every day. And they better be your running sneakers because you're going to get your steps in. Also, make sure you turn Pokemon on and put your phone in the back pocket because you're going to hatch eggs and walk miles and get all kinds of credit for things like that. So it's the Mandalay Bay. I got sent to the Interop network hot stage. And so this is something, because this is everybody's brand new widgets and you're bringing them all together and trying to make them work. We set it up and it happens in a warehouse outside of, or it used to happen in Brisbane, right outside of San Francisco. And so the first week it was all of the layer 1 guys, the cable guys, and the switch and router guys came together. And so they'd all been working together for a week. This was not the real warehouse. I just had to get a picture of a warehouse, but I wanted you to get the image. So there's this big warehouse where the pallets are, would be all of these tables set up with like 30 engineers all sitting in front of their gear and trying to interconnect everything and test everything, make sure that everything's going to work, right? So I show up and it's week 2. I'm the only Wi-Fi engineer that's going to be in the room. I'm also the only female. So this is what it looked like when I walked into the warehouse. Everybody stops still and they're staring around like maybe a predator, something strange has walked into the room. So
that's so funny.
This is my introduction to this hot stage event. But you know, it goes okay. We all get along. You know, I look around at the other meerkats and I go, oh, you look like you played Dungeons and Dragons. You look like you still live in your mother's basement. I mean, like we're all friends because I know that these are my people, right? So we're getting along fine. We get through we're getting our stuff set up. What I didn't know is that, and I'd kind of been looking over the connectivity, unless we were wired in, there was a Wi-Fi connection. And so I don't know how many of you guys know Stephen Jay Gould. He was this paleontologist. He wrote for American Smithsonian. He was just a fantastic scientist and he was a world-class speaker, and I got to see him speak once. And he was talking about how you see what you're attuned to see based on your expertise. And he once went out on a dig, an archaeological dig somewhere in Ethiopia. And his background as a paleo biologist was actually in snail fossils. And so this guy has been working, he's meeting up with this guy who's been doing a dig out here for like 5 years. They're trying to find, you know, the beginnings of Homo sapiens, and they're looking for fossils and everything. And everywhere Stephen Jay Gould goes, he can't walk 5 feet without finding a snail fossil. This guy says he's been here 5 years. He's never seen a single snail fossil, but that's all Stephen Jay Gould can see. So in this warehouse, what's the first thing I see when I walk in is this access point that's hanging up on, you know, behind this beam. And I'm staring at it because it's, you know, kind of sort of one of our competitors. It's really a piece of crap kind of access point. And I was sort of surprised that it was there, but I didn't say anything because I don't know the other meerkats yet. A couple of days later, when we've all made friends and we're joking around, the 30 of them now start pounding on this network. I mean, we're actually pushing a lot of data, and we're really stressing that access point. And now they know me well enough, they start joking around. It's like, wow, it's too bad we don't know a Wi-Fi engineer who could get us some good stuff. And I was like, oh yeah, I've got, 80 access points here that I'm staging for everything. I can set one up. We can spare that for right now. So I throw it together, I throw it up. What I don't know is that the reporter from Dark Reading, who's been going around and interviewing people and talking to us and just basically documenting the hot stage process and what we're doing in order to get ready for this big event that's going to start in a couple of weeks, is that he's getting ready to do a live radio broadcast. Well, I might have, it might have trickled through my ear that he was going to do that, but it never would have occurred to me that he would do a live radio broadcast and he would be putting it across the Wi-Fi, because who does that? So I've just brought up this brand new Wi-Fi. He gets on the radio. He starts his radio show and he makes a big deal about how, I just had my network news moment. I was rushing to get the access point started up because, by then he had said, oh yeah, I'm going to be doing it. I was like, oh crud, we better get it up. I said something a little bit stronger, but that's okay. So we get it all up and he's going through his show, and the shows have been running, like 20 minutes. And in the first 5 minutes, he gets this really puzzled look and he's sitting across the table from me. I've been ignoring him. I've been doing, continuing on with what I needed to do. And he looks up, he says, well, that's weird. I just dropped the connection. And then he waited a couple seconds and then the connection, the Wi-Fi came back up, he reconnected and he was able to keep going. You know how every once in a while, like you'll have this flash of brilliance, you'll have this sudden insight of clarity. I mean, like it happens almost never. And unfortunately for me, it happened right then because I knew exactly what I had done wrong. I mean, exactly. And I was running through my head like, okay, because what happened was there was a channel change on that access point because I had left it in kind of learning mode. We won't go into the details of it. And I was trying to remember how the algorithm worked because now he's got like 15 minutes left in his show. There is a 50-50 chance that I was going to get away with it. And it wasn't going to happen again before the end of his show. And like 45 seconds before the end of his show, it did it again. And at this point, all 30 of those meerkats were sitting up, staring at me with the, oh my God, did you just crash the network twice in the middle of a live broadcast? And so the answer to that is absolutely. That is absolutely what I did. And these guys were just, I mean, the blood was drained from everyone's faces and they were just staring at me like, is she going to be okay? And the answer is, I stood up, I did this move, and I said, go big or go home, boys. And everybody kind of laughed it off and, they clapped me on the back and said, well, you're effed now because you're one of us. This isn't even like in the top 10 things that we've done wrong. And I immediately walked out of the warehouse with my cell phone. I called my boss and it told her, I need to tell you why you should fire me today because you're not going to believe what I just did. And I told her the story. And it was a boneheaded, rookie mistake that I had made. And she took a deep breath and she said, have you ever seen a global data center go red country by country because you accidentally plugged in one cable? And I said, no. And she said, well, then I don't want to hear about it because you're not even in my league yet. And so that's one of the things that's wonderful about having a female boss who understands things like that. So that's the story of, you're gonna screw up. And, luckily, and there's no way, there is just almost no way that you're going to screw up worse than almost everybody else in the room has done. And maybe not even in the top 10 or 100, depending on who's in the room and how honest they're being with you. Okay, so earlier I told you that, Hannah told you that I'd been in Wi-Fi since '99. I've been with Ruckus since 2010. I want to step back for just a second and tell you how it is that I got into Wi-Fi. And it's, again, one of those sheer dumb luck things. Or it wasn't. It was one of those, things that just happened. Because in '99, I was still at Nortel and I'm working on just the creme de la creme. This is the Cadillac of ATM, multi-service edge switches. So this is a WAN device. And I used to tell people, because of the everything, all the services that this product could do, that by the time you could make it sing and dance and you understood all of the services from X.25, V.35, Ethernet, the voice video, and the ATM and frame relay, that you had a graduate degree in WAN. Well, around this time, Nortel bought Bay. And so now we have LAN people trying to get along with WAN people. And let me tell you, this doesn't work. LAN people and WAN people do not speak each other's language at all. It's amazing because everything's on running across a wire and they still couldn't have less in common with each other. The LAN people look at the WAN as this big cloud that's in the middle of the network, and they say, well, a miracle happened here and it's not my responsibility. The WAN people look at the LAN people and say, well, I handed you my pipe. How you break it out and get it to that end user is not my problem, and I don't really care to get down to that level. So at this time, Nortel decided to get into the wireless business, or Wi-Fi. And this is very early on in the Wi-Fi thing. So, I mean, I don't think anybody at that time really could have predicted that it was going to blow up the way it did. But the LAN people had absolutely zero interest in it because it was layer 2 and they don't really play down at that level. The WAN people, who are layer 2 people, are looking at that saying, well, it's an access service. What do I care? And so nobody wanted to be on the project. And what's the story of my career? Well, if nobody wants it, give it to Heather, she'll do it. And so that's how I ended up in Wi-Fi. 5 years later, 2004, Nortel decided to get really serious into Wi-Fi. And it was even a bigger, I mean, this was a nasty project that ended up eating up my entire summer. I mean, literally, I rolled out of bed in the morning and it would be Wednesday and I'd realize I hadn't showered. It was a lot like 2020, but it was all in one summer for me in 2004. I went home, I didn't work from the office anymore, but I ended up on this project because absolutely none of the guys, none of the WAN guys, none of the LAN guys wanted to touch it with a 10-foot pole, and I was the one who got stuck with it. Now, that was 2004. As of 2020, I can tell you that absolutely none of those guys still have a career in tech. They have all had to, I mean, Nortel went under in 2008, 2009. They all ended up having to go on and re-career in various different things. So again, sheer dumb luck. And that's what brings me back to this slide. Because of my experience at Interop, and remember I told you that guy was just too lazy and didn't want to go. Well, I was too terrified to screw it up. And so I put in 16-hour days. Did I work harder than I needed to while I was there? Was it a stupid conference? And if the Wi-Fi had gone down, would anybody still be writing a book about it? No, but I was the only Wi-Fi engineer there. It was my first time doing it, and I wanted to make sure that that everything ran well. Later that year, or just a few months after Interop, Black Hat was getting ready to happen. This is run by the same company. At the time, it was the same conference running company, the event planners. They had a Wi-Fi company who quit answering the phone because they had just been acquired by HP. So the Aruba people were in defib and just didn't even know what they were going to be doing. So when they needed a Wi-Fi engineer, the Interop guys said, well, I don't know what you know about Ruckus, but what you knew is you need a Heather to come run it. And that's how I ended up at Black Hat. And so from 1919, 2004, with the crap assignment that nobody else wanted to do, I became the Wi-Fi engineer at Black Hat. And 2 years later, I completely displaced Fortinet, sorry guys, out of the NOC, so that they were no longer the switching company, they were no longer the firewall company, and I took over for both the switching and the wireless, and Palo Alto came in and took over the firewall. And that's to a certain extent what being a bitch will do for you. So I wanted to end this with Hannah told you that I have a TikTok, just because I want y'all to know how hip and cool I am, that I wanted to show you this. I have another TikTok, but on the off chance that you guys are listening to this at work or with your kids in the background, I'm gonna just send you the link for that one. Because there is a highly inappropriate word that is appropriately used at the time. And that has to do with mansplaining. So when you watch that TikTok, I want you to think about the fact that I left DEF CON one year. I was literally in an Uber from San Jose up to San Francisco so that I could be in the Twit TV studios to record a podcast for Twyat to do their DEF CON and Black Hat in review episode. That got my Uber driver looked down at my bag that was branded with Black Hat. He said, "Oh, you know, what are you doing with Black Hat?" "I'm their Wi-Fi engineer." I then spent the drive from San Jose to San Francisco in California traffic, having Wi-Fi explained to me badly by my Uber driver. And instead of getting mad or upset, I had the time of my life because I live tweeted him. And people, the Wi-Fi Twitterdom had a blast. He was Twitter famous by the time we got to San Francisco, and it was a blast. So I'm going to end with this. Let me go back to, shoot, I forgot how to do the share on this one. Hang on. New share. There we go. See, practice makes perfect. So I'm going to play this one for you just so that you guys remember what crazy can do.
And if we dream of equal opportunity, delusional. When we're too good, there's something wrong with us. And if we get angry, we're hysterical or rational or just being crazy. A woman boxing was crazy. A woman dunking, crazy. Coaching an NBA team, crazy. A woman competing in a hit job, changing her sport, landing a double cork 1080, or winning 23 Grand Slams, having a baby, and then coming back for more. Crazy, 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 and crazy. So if they want to call you crazy, fine. Show them what crazy can do. If we want to play against men.
All right. So, and with that, I'll post the link to the other one, at the other TikTok, but I just wanted to have a chance to tell you guys a little bit about this and let you know that if I can do it, anyone can do it.
Heather, that was so great. And the thing that I think I love most about that story is that you're here talking to all of us about that mistake. You know, I feel like a lot of people would never, ever talk about that again. And I love that you're here saying, no, I'm a woman in the arena, and you can make mistakes in the arena. I think all of us strive for perfection, you know, and feel like, why even apply myself, because I'll make a mistake. And one of the other favorite things about that story is that you held yourself back, you know, and then the other woman in your corner said, no, get out there. And it's just proof of what women supporting women can do. And don't mistake me. There were a lot of men out there saying it too, telling me, you know, but it, you know, until you internalize it, until you tell yourself that. And I will say this, it was Black Hat was one of the three projects that I wrote up, because I thought, okay, who in the world can tell me that pushing, you know, a terabyte an hour across a temporary network that I stood up yesterday isn't, you know, good enough. But it took me getting to that level. By the way, interestingly enough, one of the other projects was one that I did for ITDRC. I love that. That's so amazing. And it's proof that, you know, working hard creates that opportunity. Like, you got those opportunities from being excellent in your field. And then the actions you took to go out there and chase those bigger jobs and go after things, even if you failed, I mean, those actions created results. And yeah. I feel like that's a wonderful lesson.
Well, and another one is, I mean, consistently, it was, everybody thought they were giving me the crap detail. Then, I mean, it's sort of like, you know, greens and sow's ears. You take what you're given and you make something phenomenal out of it. I wouldn't have told you that this is what it would have ended up happening It's just, that's what I was given. And so that's what I made of it.